Our last speaker, Cody, who is an entrepreneur and public voice in immortality and longevity culture, especially as content creator for the Immortalists. So please give it up for Cody.
Thank you. I also did not come prepared with slides, so I apologize for those of you who are visual. You're going to have to just power through and listen here. I want to address the question that Jose posed earlier before we started these presentations of how do we move this movement forward? And if you really boil it down, there's a challenge of supply and demand, which seems simple enough, but how do we break that down a little bit more? There's a few aspects to this. There's the problem of science, which many of you are working on. So there's that, but why has it not achieved a cure to aging in most of these age-related diseases yet? Is it just because the science isn't there? That's a questionable thing, but if we look a little bit further back, there's a challenge of funding, which many of you have addressed and asked about and talked about, and there's also a challenge of potentially outdated policy and politics at play here. But if you take another step back, you can see there's an element of, and this is where the demand comes in, it's people who want it. We see this crowd here, and there's a decent number of people watching live and virtually around the world, and up to hundreds of people who show up to Radfest and Aubrey's event in Dublin. There is a community for this, but the demand is not to a level where the voice is heard loud enough to affect change on a political and policy level. And if that were to happen, if enough people were to advocate, and this is where the public advocacy comes in, we all need to be louder, we all need to talk to more people. And in doing so, that voice becomes more unified. I've given an analogy before of a symphony. How many people have seen a symphony before, or at least know what that is? Not a very engaging crowd here. Okay, I can work with that. So you probably at least know what a symphony is. When you go to a concert, and if you haven't been, just imagine, you walk into the auditorium similar to this, and down in this area is a large orchestra with lots of different instruments. And when you get there early enough, you see them all warming up. The conductor is off the stage, and everyone's warming up their instruments, getting tuned. And if you look down and you pay attention to the flutes, you can kind of hear what the flutes are doing. Their scales, it's very high-pitched, very airy. And then there's also a cacophony of sound that's secondary behind that because you're focused on the flute section. But then you shift your attention over to the French horns or the trumpets or whichever other instrument, and now that's what you hear. You hear them doing their scales, and you hear the tone and the timbre of that instrument. And then, again, just a cacophony of sound that the flutes have now blended into. And when you don't focus on any instrument, it's just a cacophony of sound. You don't really hear any particular thing. But when the director comes back out and stands at the front and brings his hands up, the entire orchestra comes to attention. And when the director moves his hands and the song starts, now all of a sudden you hear a unified piece of music, and it's beautiful. And that's how we need to imagine this community and this movement. We need to come together and unify that voice so that way it is heard as one song, and that will be beautiful. And it will be heard by the audience, the policymakers, the regulators, the governments around the world. And when it's heard, they understand that we as a community, as a people, not just a longevity community, but a human community, we are the voter base. So they're going to listen to us if they want to keep their jobs. So when that happens, policy can be adjusted and streamlined in order to maintain safety and efficacy, which we absolutely need. Nobody wants fraudsters coming into this space, selling snake oil and killing a bunch of people because they want to make a bunch of money on longevity. We definitely need a standard of safety and efficacy. But we can streamline regulation so that way we're not holding back beneficial therapies for 10 to 15 years that could be saving lives much sooner because they can prove themselves much faster. So when that policy can be streamlined and adjusted, then investors see the potential. They see their potential investment having a higher profit margin and having that return come back sooner. And that's why in a space like what we're doing with Neovia, we want to have a proof of concept in a city model first, and then, of course, expand from there. We'll have a sister city in South America, and then maybe eventually one here in Madrid. Who knows what the future potential holds there. But even just starting with one proof of concept, we will see that the streamlined regulation is going to speed up processes. It's going to make more investment come in, but parallel to more money coming in and funding your projects, there's also going to be a reduction of the cost to go through those trials because there won't be as much regulatory red tape to go through. And the regulation that is there is actually there to promote safety and efficacy. We'll have positive regulation and a streamlined way through it with approval processes that happen as trials are happening and are tailored to each therapy and trial that you're trying to do. Because in this space, there are so many different things with genetic editing, with cellular rejuvenation, with stem cells. They all require a different way of looking at it and proving its safety and efficacy. That one blanket definition of that can't be used to cover everything. And that's a big challenge we're running into. So as more funding rolls in and as the cost of trials come down, then we'll finally reach that point where we're 5 to 10 years away, or we're 3 to 5 years away from having a major breakthrough in curing age-related diseases and ending human suffering as a result of that is actually going to be 3 to 5 years away. As where we are now, we've heard 3 to 5 years, we've heard 5 to 10 years, we've heard 10 to 20 years for the last 40 or 50 years. We need to get to a point where 3 to 5 years means 3 to 5 years on the slow end. We think we could make things happen much, much faster, and that's what we plan on doing. But the major goal is to open up the funding opportunities, the investment opportunities into your scientific community, into the trials you are doing. Again, like I said earlier, because selfishly, I want to live and I want to be healthy. I don't want to grow up older and then die from being sick or just getting old because we're just dealing with the things we're dealing with now. So how do we move this movement forward to break it down to the most simple thing? Advocate, talk to people. That demand will, through, as I just discussed, hit all the different points where finally the supply will have to be there. Thank you.